Northern Uganda had a war. Most of them recently have been committing suicide, and some have been battling with depression without tools of how to manage it.
This is a region that has been in civil war for over 20 years. We've lost so many lives. I've lost uncles, I've lost friends, and the ones who have survived 13 years later, when the guns went silent, people have been struggling with so many issues, from poverty to divorce to family breakup to neglected children and to failure to even think clearly and plan and produce food for themselves.
Ideally in the community I always see people who are depressed, and I also thought of maybe helping them. So when I heard of this training, in the first place I felt like, wow, it may be a good program. So I was interested in seeing the thing, but I was worried that I may not get really to capture the skills and maybe the knowledge as in to handle.
So we believe us coming as FineMind, train 16 people from different sub-counties, we can add impact on awareness of mental health disorders, especially depression.
It has been of benefit to, first of all, to us. So we are trained as health workers, so we got a lot of information from there, and now we are sharing with the client. It's really of benefit to both of us.
My name is Ruth Awo. I'm a health tutor in St. Mary's Midwifery Training School, Kalongo. It's very good if we add it into our curriculum at every level, so that we also buy this idea of coming to the community and doing this.
I'm Masara. I'm a mental health counselor. With basic needs, they are going to also be doing counseling, and they'll be making referrals to us for conditions they cannot manage, which is beyond them. And that will really be so good. At the end of the day, we shall help the community.
No tam doing chunya beri nene ni anatira no ha ki yonge mi nya tam ke ra beri ni no mano ne anate no ra wang ma ra wa tang ha ne ano gie gu wen ku be dang ha do pa ka
no chunya ma ne dong tie ka pong ma be la la cha ko no nge ka dong chunya ma ne mane beri ni pim me cha ma do me na tam si da no chunya te ka dak ne yang gonya dong te ka beri pian tam no me ane no dong gina no ti chuero chunya ne kara no me ne yo ne kita mira wo ke de no pangeo ero kita endo me na ne darau ne ka kar sta ba chero kancha bichunga kenya.
And I hope that our work, our message, FineMind as a whole, can really provide some infrastructure and support in doing away with this fear that mental health is something that needs to be held and tightly without someone's approval, not giving that away. And I'm hopeful that by doing so, people are more apt and warm to share some of these problems, and some of these long-held trauma and hurts and pains can come out, and they can feel brighter, happier, more constructive citizens of this place.
The quality of life is going to improve if it's done periodically.
There are others who are on treatment, but there are others who need to start treatment. But you find this medicine for the government medicine may get out of stock, so it needs to be also supported in some way.
What if now we extend to another sub-county, because this place like here is very far. Not all people are managing to come up to here.
The real uniqueness, the real value that we can offer Uganda is coming back again and again and again, and ensuring that this work continues without my support, so the local people can actually take this in their own hands and see this throughout their lives and furthermore.
Hello, I'm Sasha Nicole, and this is Pavel Reppo, the founder of FineMind. Today, Pavel will share with us about the work that FineMind is doing in Uganda to support community mental health through a peer-to-peer support system that recruits, trains, and empowers community members. So thank you for being here today, Pavel.
Thank you so much for having me. So excited.
Yeah, it's great to have you. To begin, where in Uganda is FineMind located, and what aspects of mental health does your organization focus on?
Yeah, we're based in northern Uganda. It's a place called Agago District, a little bit remote, almost kind of at the tippy top of Uganda, bordering South Sudan. And we focus on depression and anxiety.
Okay, excellent. And your model of mental health, for me, was very unique. Would you say more about where in Uganda your staff serves and describe the model that FineMind uses?
Absolutely. We use kind of an interesting approach called task sharing. So the basic idea behind that is that you reallocate the few specialists that are available in Uganda, and then you level up kind of a lesser qualified worker to provide basic supports and services. And Uganda is in a kind of an interesting position. They have just about 30 or so psychiatrists for the whole country of about 43 million people. So for them to emulate or to replicate what we do here in the States is just impossible. But this idea of kind of leveraging and mobilizing everyday people is effective. It works. Matter of fact, it's actually been really effective in HIV/AIDS care, neonatal care. It's not a unique idea, but I think it's really kind of gaining some steam and momentum within mental health.
Yeah. How did you discover this model?
It was kind of serendipity. It was, it started with a basic Google search. I've lived and I have obsessive compulsive disorder, so I've struggled with my own fair bout of mental illness. And I sat down and I wrote kind of global mental health landscape. Just kind of piqued my curiosity, and I was really astounded to see that so many places don't have the adequate supports or what we have here in the States. But this approach really spoke to me. And there was a particular man, his name is Vikram Patel. And Vikram in 2015 was voted one of the 100 most influential people by Time magazine for his work in global mental health. I was inspired by him. Wow, my God, I have to reach out to Vikram. So I emailed him.
Yeah.
I emailed Vikram and said, this is who I am. I love your work. Would you be open to a Skype call? And Vikram, within a couple of hours, wrote me back. And that jump started the process where I eventually attended a course that he and a nonprofit he has started in India called Leadership in Mental Health. And the focus about that was essentially looking at interventions and methods in low-income countries that support mental health. So it really kind of, just pierced me. I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
And that jump started kind of this whole journey of FineMind.
Wow. I imagine, so when you equip the local trainees, which, is very, very cool to have that kind of give them the keys in terms of their own agency and ability to affect change in their communities. But I would imagine there's a big learning curve. What is that process like initially?
Certainly, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mental health isn't maybe top of mind, isn't priority. I mean, in Uganda, the HIV/AIDS epidemic was rampant in the 90s, and certainly still is. Malaria, you look at other issues kind of relative to mental health, it's not something that has the political will or the support or even the financial backing. So we're kind of engaging in a lot of education to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, what is mental health? What is stress? How do we actually discuss and explore topics to that? And then let alone engaging someone in a counseling session, we're really particular and keen on never saying that someone has a disorder or you have a problem or you are depressed. We're really intentional in couching it under stress and emotional well-being. I think those are really ubiquitous and kind of universal. We all go through stress.
Yeah, everybody deals with that.
Absolutely. And that seems to be quite a bit more palatable to kind of couch it under that work and relationships. And then that's the leaping off point for us.
Yeah, kind of takes the stigma away, and then it opens the door to healing when you can kind of remove that barrier of, being stigmatized or thinking that I'm somehow defective because I'm struggling with something. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a really good approach. How does your team determine which community members to train?
We've done a couple different variations. Our initial pilot program, we actually took on folks who had no experience in mental health, let alone health. So our first three, I owe a lot to. They were kind of a courageous three, if you will. We had a social worker, we had a journalist, and a land surveyor. So if we talk about no experience with mental health, but these individuals had a passion and enthusiasm. They'd love their community. So we upskilled their kind of supports and their services, and they provided the care. We've since shifted a bit and actually identify existing health assistants within health centers. So our kind of bigger mission is, how do we integrate within primary care? How do we get mental health to be a thing that when folks and patients come to a hospital or a health center, that can be yet another thing that they are offered. So at the moment, mostly health assistants, we give them the additional tool set. And in the midst of them providing care or lab results, I mean, you name it, they can also provide counseling as well.
Yeah, it sounds more holistic than just treating kind of the physical problem, but to really address all of it.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And your approach is community driven. Why is that so important in your work?
It's the most important part. I think the model in and of itself would fall flat without community, kind of the spine, the heartbeat, the community piece. We also work in Uganda, and I'm not Ugandan.
Okay. Yeah, that's
shocker,
what we talked about. Sure. We should, say more about that if you would.
Absolutely. I mean, as long as I live, if I live to be 1,000 years old, I will never be Ugandan. I will never understand the culture completely, and I never want to tug upon any sort of colonial or racial, American kind of tensions of, I'm this individual that needs to be looked upon as someone who has vested power and authority. I think the work really hinges upon me, and I've taken a step back. And how do we really empower the local community to provide the care? That's the key. That's how you get the most effective buy-in, support, success above all. So I really have to check my own place of where am I making decisions and where am I not making decisions. And likely it's me kind of taking a step back and really giving the space to let our community thrive. They know best.
They do.
And they will always know best.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then in addition to mental health services, FineMind is developing some new initiatives. So tell us more about the efforts that are coming down the pipeline.
We're so excited. This actually kind of sprouted from a remarkable conversation I had with a woman. Her name is Tessa Roberts. And I remember I was on a panel with her, and I essentially kind of asked the question of, how do we effectively bridge this treatment gap? I mean, in most low-income countries, about 90%, an astonishing 90% of folks don't receive services that they could otherwise benefit from. And she essentially pushed back on me, and she said, Pavel, a lot of the work that we've been doing isn't moving the needle forward. It's not actually bridging the treatment gap. What we need to be doing is looking at social determinants like employment, like housing, like school, community, a really kind of, to your point, a holistic, comprehensive approach. And that jolted us to look at employment and economic empowerment. So what we're looking at kind of in the next couple of weeks, matter of fact, is that we'll identify 100 women, young mothers that will concurrently receive counseling, but they'll also be going through a 2-month business boot camp where they'll be learning financial management, marketing skills. How do you generate a business idea, right? What are your personal values, and how do you infuse whatever you're creating with those particular motivations? Then those women will actually go in the community and they'll solicit feedback and customer interviews, really, be amongst the community and let them kind of pave and facilitate that creation.
Yeah.
And then we'll give them money, seed money as well, to purchase materials and equipment.
Yeah.
And they'll have ongoing mentorship as well. So our kind of hypothesis, our hope is, in addition to the counseling and this economic empowerment, it should, in effect, benefit both. It should be this real incredible synergy happening.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, because you need, I don't know if you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's only so much you can do. If you don't have food and shelter, you can't get beyond the other levels of what is needed. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And let's back up a little bit. I'm just curious, what led you, because you're American, I think you said from Colorado originally.
Yeah, I live here in Denver. But I was born in Belarus.
Oh, okay.
Eastern Europe. I moved here when I was a little boy, about 5 years old.
Okay.
So I've grown up here in Colorado. I mean, what led me is maybe a more kind of complicated answer.
Yeah.
I've always thought I would be an engineer. I was destined to be an aerospace engineer, shifted a bit slightly to become a mechanical engineer, and the path veered a little bit more, and I pursued working with kids and young adults with intellectual disabilities.
Okay.
And that was the most rewarding experience of my life. But I think in the midst of that, as I mentioned, I mean, living with mental illness myself, it hasn't been easy in any way, shape, or form. And yet I've had so many resources at my fingertips. And I think we're really privileged here in the States. And I've had therapy, OCD coaches, friends, supports, literature, I mean, you name it. And yet when I kind of pan out, I look like a place like Uganda, or I mean, you can cherry pick any country across the world. They don't have the same supports that we do. Yeah. So in many ways, the silver lining is the fact that I live here in the States.
Sure.
And when I look at a place like Uganda, they really have a void. And how do we level up? How do we build a system? How do we build the adequate scaffolding to provide support to folks who are struggling like I am, or who are struggling like me, or who don't even know that they have depression or anxiety, or I mean, you name it. So that kind of jump started the whole process.
Yeah. And how did that get to specifically Uganda, of all places in the world? Did you just take a map and throw a pin at it? Just wake up one day and spin a globe and touch it? I mean, how did you decide?
I wish I could say that. Well, what a fun story that would be.
Right.
No, I was maybe 20 or 19 at the time. I was naive, ambitious, young adult.
Idealistic, probably a little.
Oh, too much. And I remember thinking that I'm gonna change the world, and let me start with Africa. We
just
talk
take
about
on
narcissism,
Africa.
right? Right. Let me
the
go.
Whole continent, just you as a 20-year-old, all by yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the confidence, or the too much of it. And I had a friend at the time who I kind of shared this, expressed the interest, and she had another friend who ran an organization called the Uganda Project.
Okay.
Where they supported about a dozen young adults who were orphaned by AIDS. So it was through a connection. Why Uganda? I mean, if she had a friend who ran an organization in Zimbabwe and Namibia, I mean, I could have ended up there. But I eventually traveled to Uganda, met these students that they supported, and I didn't end up changing Africa. I mean, that didn't end up happening. Shocker, right?
I don't think you're the first to discover that. I think many people in this field probably started out with that hero mentality of, oh, well, I have the answers. Let me just bring them to you.
Right. What I think what happened is, like, I came home and I realized that if I am ever to make any impact, I need to keep coming back.
Okay.
I can't go once, feel good about myself, take a couple of good pictures, and be done. So I made a promise to myself that I will come back And I've since come back multiple times. I have dear friends. I've built community. I mean, in many ways, it's kind of my second home. And in the idea of FineMind, with me making inroads and having those kind of deep roots, and also because the country lacks those specialists, it was a pretty good kind of a place to start implementing this model.
Yeah. And in your experience now, and especially having gone through a little more experience, what is your core belief about how development work should be done?
I think I quickly touched on this, but to what extent possible you get out the way. I can't echo that enough. I think kind of laden in creating something is this kind of an inherent idea that you need to have control, that you need to look over, scrutinize every single decision and make sure that it's perfection. And I think within development work, it's incumbent, it's critical that whatever you create is A, owned by the local people, and B, that you swallow your ego and you are not at the front. You're not, taking the credit for the work. You're not the one who's dictating the decisions. I think your ultimate role in this particular context, or what I should be doing is supporting them, their decisions, their discourse, the services they provide, whether that's looking for financial capital or just kind of being there as a morale or boost. But again, they know best.
Yeah.
And as I sit here in a comfortable home, with an 80-degree day in Colorado, I can't claim to know what's going on in Uganda.
Sure.
And I think it would be foolish of me to say that. And I never want to fall in that rut. So my work is supporting our team on the ground in Uganda.
Yeah. So for development to be successful, and maybe this is reiterating the same question, but I'll ask it. What is the most crucial element for development to succeed?
I think I'll kind of just double down on the same answer. Foregoing this illusion that you need to be in control, which I think is much more difficult said than done.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I have a pretty intimate experience with that. With OCD, in many ways, OCD for me came as a result of not feeling like I was in control and imagining creating this world where I could be in control. But the illusion there is that, if I'm turning off a light switch, washing my hands continuously, looking for this just right feeling, I'm actually out of control. So I think I see moments where it'll actually eke into my work where I need to be in control. I need it to be just right. And I have to check myself over and over and over again. So that's a pretty more intimate personal experience, but I think it could be extrapolated to most folks. I mean, don't let that control bug intimidate what others are creating, what others are doing, or dictate or affect the creation of the local work.
I think you touch on something really powerful just then, kind of that paradox of when you have the illusion of control, it's when you're actually out of control. But
Beautiful.
when you can surrender and release. It's kind of like, the Chinese finger trap, like
you're
trying so hard to get out of it, you're not. But then when you just let yourself kind of relax, then you can come out of it. So, I think that's
a beautiful image. I love that.
Yeah. I think that's very contrary to human nature. I don't, no matter where you're from, what your background is, I think we all kind of have this desire to be in control because there's a sense of security in that. But it's not always a real security. It doesn't mean that we're really safe. We just think that we are. And I think it takes real strength to surrender that and to let that go. And then once you do, then flourishing can happen because of that release. So.
Well, you said it 1,000 times better than I
did. We said the same thing, just in different ways, I think. Well, just a quick question. If anybody wanted to support your work, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. Our website, www.afindmind.org.
All right.
Poke around there. I think there's some incredible things. You'll really kind of get a pulse and a heartbeat for who we are. I think values really are critical. So our values are kind of front and center there, and I think a lot of kind of feel for the local people. So that's the hope. So go on there.
Okay. Excellent. We'll make sure that's listed in the description below so anyone watching can access that very easily. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. I am curious to know how you measure impact in your work.
That's a slight tension at the moment, but we've tried to kind of find our niche there, if you will. Interestingly enough, a lot of funders need impact. They need to see quantifiable data in order to support the work. At least within our work, we use a screening questionnaire called the Patient Health Questionnaire 9. So it's 9 questions that look over the last couple of weeks. Basic experiences. Is your sleep impacted? Is your appetite impacted? Talk about how your concentration has been hampered. Kind of a motley crew of questions, if you will. And from that, you can glean possible, probable depressive symptomology. So the idea here is that when we engage in a patient in the very first session, that number will likely be a little bit higher. And the hope, as you continue to meet with the patient, is that number decreases. That's the hope. And certainly that happens sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. And in that context, we need to be keen on finding additional supports and not, again, letting our egos kind of get in the way of what did we do wrong? Why haven't we helped this particular person? So we have a couple of referral supports in the area that even if patients come to us with, let alone, say schizophrenia or psychosis or something that falls outside the purview of depression and anxiety, we immediately triage them to that support.
Yeah. Do you find, kind of going back to the donor conversation, do you find that it's a hard sell? Kind of, I don't know, it seems to me that a lot of times people want to feel like, oh, if I give, $1, I want 90 cents of that dollar to make an impact, and I want to know exactly how. And, with this, it's not like you can say we fed X amount of kids or we built X amount of houses. Like, is this something that you have to deal with? And if so, what have you learned, or how have you kind of, I don't know what I want to ask, but, gotten around this, or how have you maybe helped donors to understand what the impact really is, even if it's not something you can necessarily put in a clean number?
Of course. I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Quantifying someone's impact or journey with mental health is difficult. It's challenging. How do you effectively put a number to someone's experience? I think if I had the ideal conversation or way to portray our work, it would be story, right? When you engage someone and they share a challenging time in their life, and then after a couple of sessions, you build that trust, their face brightens up a bit, they have more kick in their step. You could truly, and their story changes. That, you can't put a finger to that. You can't put a number to that. If I could bottle that in some sort of elixir potion and give that to a funder, that would be exemplary. But to your point, the tension and the balance is that we do have to come with numbers. To your point, we do have to show, for every dollar spent, how much of that is actually going to direct services. Yep. How much does a counseling session cost? And if it costs that much, to what extent is it improving a particular person's depression? Yeah. So we've, I don't think we've done the most effective job with it, but this is a learning that we're kind of engaging in real time. How do we measure quantitative and qualitative impact without actually sacrificing someone's humanity? Yeah. Talk about putting a person's story as a number. That really takes away a lot of who they are, and I want to do justice to that person's story of them actually coming to us and entrusting us with this incredible space. and actually putting a number to it, I think sometimes devoids that of its value. So I think you hit something there. It's something that's certainly in the process.
Yeah. And kind of on a similar vein, but a little bit different, sustainability is the buzzword of our generation, and which is a good thing. We need sustainability. It's really crucial. But how do you really know that your efforts are sustainable? What guides you in that? How do you discern that? And even if you're willing to share some lessons of mistakes or kind of having to relearn or make shifts in that progress.
Yeah, that is the buzzword. I had a fascinating conversation with an individual yesterday, and he essentially said philanthropy is an investment. It's not revenue, meaning that if you rely upon philanthropy, you're not sustainable. I mean, and I think it was a little bit of a kind of a jolt to really sit with that. I think in our context, what we're trying to create is, as opposed to going to foundations and donors and funders, how do we get government to see the value of our work and to actually dole out financial support for it? And it's a really interesting and kind of slippery slope to get them on board, because if we go at the angle of showing social impact, right, look at how many people are being supported. It's easy to push back upon them and say, well, if we work on the local road, look at how many people are supported. If we address food insecurity, look at how many people are supported. So we get lost in that. I think the more interesting argument is to actually tie some of what we do, at least for the government, to lost money. I think dollars make people kind of more alert. Yeah. So our hope here is as we push to integrate mental health care within primary care, how do we get the government to actually dole out budgetary money to support this initiative? Yeah. I think from my vantage point, government is critical. If you don't get them on, at some point you're running up a slippery slope. You're kind of in the hamster wheel for a long time. Yeah. And talk about sustainability, it's not. It really isn't. So that's our big play. Yeah. And hopefully at some point we can realize that.
Yeah. Do you think it would be ideal if eventually the government were taking over the efforts that NGOs kind of come in to take care of, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know if I want to extrapolate to all NGOs, yeah. but I do think NGOs, I think they have a place because they're nimble. They have the creativity, the resilience to pivot, and they're quick. Government is laden with bureaucracy and red tape, but yet they have a little bit more firepower per usual, as a kind of I've come to be. And I think if there can be some sort of merriment between the two, that's the real bang for the buck there.
Like a healthy collaboration. Yeah. I would say that applies to this country too, where, we have limitations, and sometimes the nonprofits in America can do things that our government can't, and vice versa. Due to funding, the government has more fiscal resources that it can invest that many nonprofits don't. So that's a good point. I think you're the first person I've interviewed that's made that point. Typically, I think the mentality is let's not have NGOs, or let's minimize NGOs as much as possible. And I'll be honest, that's a little bit of my philosophy, because I come to it with a philosophy of outside, American NGOs or European NGOs. I would say local NGOs, that's a different thing. Local nonprofits, it's a very different conversation. But I had never thought about the fact that, and when you talk about kind of the ability for nonprofits to pivot so quickly and the lack of red tape, and that, I think there's definitely a value in that I personally hadn't considered before you mentioned that. So,
well, thank you for that.
Yeah. Could you tell us about a person or a group that has really touched you personally in your work?
Yeah, I mean, it's countless people. I'll pick one. My colleague, his name is David. And FineMind at the time was kind of dead in the waters. I mean, we were scrambling a bit. Where do we provide supports? Where is home base? How do we do this? And emails with David. David was working for a university at the time. And matter of fact, we are in Agago district because of David.
Wow.
This was home.
Yeah.
And I'll quickly give some context. Northern Uganda in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s was in civil war.
Okay.
There was a particular group called the Lord's Resistance Army under the helm of a man named Joseph Kony. And rebels would pillage, ransack, mutilate, kill. They would abduct kids to become child soldiers. And David was able to escape, leave Agago district. And when we kind of jump-started the conversation, essentially, he's like, Pavel, as this conversation with the university is on pause, what if we do something? What if, we host an event, kind of a festival of sorts? We invite the community, we have music, performances, skits, and we're able to engage the community in counseling. And it never crossed my mind. I said, okay. and it kind of sparked this really organic relationship of, I'd never met him. It was all via email, but there was this undercurrent of trust.
Yeah.
And it's really panned out well. He is kind of our right-hand man. He's the one who has the eyes, the ears, the hands, the feet on the ground, and why we're in Agago district, and why we're the community is providing the care. So I maybe I don't say this enough, but I owe a lot to him. For as much as I entrusted him, he trusted me as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's important to have that two-way trust. What would you say is your vision for the future of FineMind?
I think vision is critical. I'd love for FineMind to be kind of the go-to peer mental health organization across the world.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? I think we're starting here in one district in Uganda as we work ambitiously to integrate within primary care. But how do we seed that to other districts? How do we go to another country? And ultimately, again, how do we empower the local people? And effectively, I'd hope we do that with mentorship, with perhaps some seed capital, but give them kind of the responsibility and the space to create a similar program in their backyard. I mean, that's the real hope. And I'm hoping that through our last couple of years, we've stumbled upon something really interesting that could be kind of packaged and given away. So that's the ultimate goal, but more mental health for more folks. If you can boil it down.
Yeah. And you also have a goal of essentially making yourself obsolete as the executive director. So say more about that. What are your ideas for the next steps to procure that?
That's I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah.
Again, I am the only Western white person, if you will. I have some supports here in the States, but our entire programmatic team is Ugandan. We'll have in a couple of weeks here about 37 people who are all Ugandan, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And even now, I could probably justifiably say that the work happens without me. I mean, certainly, I think there's morale boost, and I bring in some finances and some resources, but I don't actually need to be there. And I'm not. I mean, talk about COVID, the last year and a half, the work has gone on swimmingly. We've probably had our best year to date.
Wow.
In terms of counseling, in terms of impact, inroads with partners. So I think that's a testament to some of that work I'm engaging in, to not dictate or to impose or to think that I need to tell them what to do. But ultimately, I think, how can it be more community run? How can we empower the locals to really kind of take into their hands and to see this flourish? That's the hope, and I think we're taking some steps as we speak.
Yep, I think you're taking the right steps. I think that's like the absolute right approach, because ultimately they should have ownership and take the lead for their own futures and their own development. So Well, I just want to ask this one more time for anyone who's listening who might be interested in either learning more about your work or supporting it financially. What would be a good way for them to do that?
Yeah, so simple. Go to the website, www.afinemind.org.
Okay, perfect. And we'll make sure that's listed below so it's easy for anyone to access. And Pavel, I just want to say thank you so much for joining today and for sharing your story. I very much respect the way that you're going about it, and especially that you're already entering into it with an exit strategy in place where you can truly pass the baton and let the local people take ownership of their own progress and flourishing, because ultimately that's what's necessary for I think the change that needs to happen in countries like Uganda to thrive in the way that I really believe they have the capacity to thrive. So thank you for the work that you're doing and keep it up.
Oh, you're far too kind. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a big honor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Here at Emanate International, it is our mission to promote nonprofits and social enterprises that equip local individuals and communities to become independent, autonomous, thriving members of society. Indeed, FineMind is certainly doing great work in Uganda to support community mental health through a peer-to-peer support system that recruits, trains, and empowers the local community members themselves. If you enjoyed our discussion today, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be in the know for future inspirational conversations with other leaders who are making great gains in improving our world. Thank you.